We use the phrase, you practice your way to high performance. And again, hope is not a strategy. And I think there's so many people that think if we do this, maybe something will happen rather than being strategic. They're just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that things will get better. There's so much power in practicing. Like, what are we really trying to do? Why does it matter? What do we need to do next? And I think when you have a plan, you actually can begin to see improvement pretty quickly. I think if we can get that right in a focused way, it's amazing what we can accomplish.
All right. So I read the book getting ready for our discussion today, and I'll read it again. I've already started recommending it to folks. So thank you so much for writing it. And before we get into it, I'm really interested in how you got into doing the leadership development work. Because I know you founded this company with Mark Miller in 2014, Lead Every Day. What were you doing before, and what got you thinking about, hey, I need to do this?
Yeah, those are great questions. I spent about a decade coaching and teaching in high schools. I was an old girls basketball coach, old high school girls basketball coach. So I did that for a while. And then in 96, I guess we were in Knoxville at the time and ended up moving back to Atlanta. I say moving back to Atlanta. It's the first time I'd been in Atlanta, but I grew up in Georgia as a kid. And so we moved down south of Atlanta, and I spent about 18 years there, as an executive pastor, actually on the staff of one of the largest churches around Atlanta, and did that for almost 2 decades. And then in 2014, I just felt that I wanted to see if I could help more leaders. I'm passionate about leadership, and we had a connection with Mark. You mentioned Mark. Actually, Mark was still at Chick-fil-A. He was the vice president of leadership development there, and I got connected to them, and I kind of went out on my own, started helping leaders, and the next thing you know, I ended up with this what has become a company over the last 11 years now. And Mark, when he retired year before last, he joined me, and yeah, we're just trying to serve leaders around the world. It's what we've been doing. So I kind of stumbled into it, I guess you'd say, in a way, but it goes all the way back to my early career when I first started, even back when I was coaching. I've always been passionate about leadership. I believe that when leaders are right, everything feels right. And when leaders aren't right, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation or not where you haven't been well led. And when it's not good, when your leader's not good, it's not good for anybody. And so we're just trying to help people lead well. I mean, honestly, I dream of a world well led, and I kind of point that to the individual and say, I dream of your world well led. So if anybody's listening, I want you to get it right, because when you do, it makes it really great for the people around you.
Yeah, I think the biggest deficit on the planet right now are leaders that are both capable and moral. That's how there's a lot of capable leaders that are not moral, and they're win-lose in just about everything that they do. But I think that's our biggest shortage on the planet. So I love that your mission is moving in that direction. It's so aligned with what I'm doing. You know, one of the best examples of observing leadership for me ever, the last couple of years in high school, I was a cook at a Coco's restaurant, and every store had 4 managers, and I'd rotate around stores, and there was a lot of turnover in managers. And there was one manager there that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. His name was Jim. I won't say his last name, but Jim. And just the way he showed up, the environment he created, he saw me, he saw potential in me. And then at the other end of the spectrum where they were just terrible. And so it was so cool seeing probably 60 or 70 different managers in different styles. What an amazing experience, having that restaurant experience for me.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it goes back to the idea, I think, of what I call integrity-based leadership. And I use that. In fact, I wanted to name our company that years ago, and everybody yelled at me. They were like, you can't call it integrity because nobody wants to hear about that. But I think we have a misdefinition of integrity. I think most of us think it means don't lie, don't cheat, and don't steal. And I don't want anybody to lie, cheat, and steal. That is part of it. But integrity really is about being holistic, like you're talking about. It's about having a public life that matches your private life. It's about having a work life that matches your home life. It's about, it really is about being integrated. It's about wholeness. It actually comes, you probably know this, but it comes from our integrity comes from our math word integer, which is a whole number. And so I think this holistic mindset, and I think we're learning more about that in today's world. It's not enough just to be great, at a skill level. It's the character side is important as well. And we always say if your heart's not right, people don't really care about your skills. And so those people that have impact on us, they are skilled, but they're also able to impact us with their character. And so I think that holistic, I like your word holistic. I think that's so important.
Yeah, and when I look at leaders, and I do a lot of leadership coaching and have programs and all that available as well. When I say capable of achieving a particular thing, so leaders, at the top of an organization, all the way to every level, their team should be designed to create value, and they should be clear about that. And the moral piece of it is all the value they create is net positive. In other words, if there's a big company out there that brags about making $1 billion or more in profit in a quarter, but because of their products or services, it took $10 billion out of the world, that's not moral. Like we can't have that. So trying to make it objective so people really understand that, I think, capable of accomplishing the thing they should be accomplishing and making win-win decisions. And the material side, everybody gets on the money piece. The emotional energy value created, I've always thought, Randy, this as sort of the X factor for leaders. It's how we show up and passionately talk about what's possible and engage people in productive conversations to get there. And the last piece of it, the spiritual value creation, it's about, I think in the context of an organization, for me, it's about connectedness and what are all the programs we can have to strengthen relationships with the team members. And wow, does that work? And most focus on the money, even 90% that say, oh, it's not about the money, it's about other things. When you look at their actions, it seems to be about the money. When you do it holistically, they end up making a lot more money. It's like they don't get it. So how does that land on you? And how would you add to that or comment on that?
Well, we talk about executing, and I'll use a phrase that we use in our standard of execution that I think it actually ties into what you're saying. We say our definition of executing the right way is to do the right thing the right way every time. And I like I like the spirit of, yeah, we need to do the right thing and we need to make money and all. I mean, I get all that, but if we don't do it in the right way, if we're just extracting value from everything we do, I think ultimately that's going to catch up. Actually, even to our bottom line, it's going to hurt performance at some point. And so the right thing, the right way, and to have that standard of doing it every time. It's great to know what you're doing and to do it in a moral way, but can you do it over time, again and again and again, showing up, adding value? And I think those are the companies, the organizations, the teams, the individuals who are the most valuable are the ones that understand that. Let's do the right thing the right way every time. So I love what you're saying. I think it's such a powerful standard to encourage people with and to coach people to. And I think when we get that right, again, just powerful stuff begins to happen. And performance, obviously, being at the top of the list of what goes up. But I think legacy's created. I think so much great stuff, again, it becomes an enduring business at that point.
I find that most companies don't have a definition of what it means to be a leader in their organization. What are you finding when you start working with companies?
Yeah, we think that is a huge gap, and we actually use a picture when we think about leadership. And our picture is it's a maybe a cliche picture at this point. A lot of people have talked about it, but we use the iceberg. We do think that's important. And the iceberg, if you go all the way back, I think it was fifth grade, they taught us about icebergs. And you probably don't have a lot in Phoenix. We don't have them here in Atlanta either, but I have seen icebergs, and what my fifth grade teacher told us was true. There's a lot more underneath the water than there is above. And I thought icebergs were just like this big thing that, massive, and some of them are massive. I mean, they're really big, but there's a lot of them. We were in Alaska and on a boat, and we saw these icebergs, and a lot of them are just small. They're floating out, and you can see above the water there's a little bit of mass, but below you can see this big blob, and it didn't have scales and a tape measure to measure anything, but you could tell there's a lot more going on underneath the water than there is on the top side. And I think that's true for leadership. When we think about leadership skills, they are very important. I mentioned a minute ago, but what are those skills? Can we cast vision? Can we build teams? Can we solve problems? Can we lead meetings? Those are skills, and you have to have those if you're going to really be an impactful leader. But there's this underneath side, our attitude and our positivity, and are we growing and learning, and do we believe in other people, and are we honest and don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal? Those things are underneath. I mean, there's a character side to our leadership, a weightiness to it that I think we underestimate. And I would just encourage anybody listening to think of the best leader you've ever known. And if you, I mean, like out of all the people you've ever known who are leaders, who's the very best you've ever known? And it's probably going to be some coach or teacher, or maybe your Aunt Mary who had a dry cleaner. I don't know. I mean, you've got somebody that comes to mind. What is it that caused them to make your list? And it won't be, I'm guessing, because they were really great at leading meetings and building teams and solving problems. It's probably going to be something about their character, their impact, their attitude, their resilience, their grit. Those are the kind of things that make somebody a leader that others want to follow. It's not enough just to have the skill. We've got to have that. Again, I said it earlier, but if your heart's not right, nobody really cares about your skills. It's the skill part is important, but the character part, there's a weightiness to that I think we don't understand sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always trying to simplify things so I can communicate better around it. And I've kind of gotten down to, in this area you're talking about, if you're a leader, is your relationship with your team members transactional? Do this, you get paid and all that? Or is it developmental? We're on this developmental journey. We're all creating value together, increasing the value we can create. And the leaders that do that, where it's developmental, we're people going through life on this journey, it feels so different and in such a better way. And I think the reason it matters is this whole concept of employee engagement. When people talk about engagement, I don't think they really know what they're talking about most of the time. Like, engaged with what is always my question. And I've experienced, so I've started 8 companies from scratch. Biggest one had over 500 team members. And getting the culture piece right, where we're all on this journey working to develop each other and going at it that way instead of transactional, I probably got twice the productive engagement with creating value than just about any other company on average out there. Yeah, what's your experience? I mean, I think that's the reason we want to do this, so we get productive engagement. The company is more valuable. All kinds of things are better, and it feels amazing. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, for sure. Engagement is at an all-time low. They tell us, the latest numbers from Gallup I saw where it's hovers around 70+ % of people are disengaged. We hear quiet quitting and the great resignation and all these terms that just remind us that most people come to work every day and just go through the motions. And if anybody's listening, I would encourage you to think about your payroll. You may say, well, that's not true with us. Everybody's engaged. Chances are there are people on your team who have left you and they actually haven't told you yet. They're still there. They're taking up labor. They're going through the motions. They're not really leaned in and engaged on what it is that you're trying to do. And I can only imagine the tens of millions, billions, trillions of dollars that costs around the world. The numbers are worse around the world, Lee, than they are in the U.S. And so this disengagement is a rampant issue at this point. And I believe I've heard people say before that people don't leave organizations; they actually leave leaders. And I think the leaders that they leave are the ones who, I can't remember, was it Liz Wiseman who wrote the book Multipliers? I'm not sure who wrote it, but Multipliers, the concept in there was you're either a multiplier as a leader or you're a diminisher as a leader. And I think when you show up every day and you think, how can I add value to the people around me? We talk about being a servant leader, almost that the picture we use is an offensive lineman in football. It's the mindset of showing up every day, day after day after day, and opening up a hole so somebody else can score. I'm always fascinated when I think about offensive linemen on football teams. It's a pretty thankless job. And all the quarterbacks get all the publicity and all the money and all this stuff. And yet these linemen just show up day after day after day. And that's true for the best leaders, the best managers I know. They really are thinking, how do I help the people around me win? And here's what I've noticed. When I help enough people win, if you do it in the right way, it won't even matter if you win or not, but you're going to win more if you help the people around you win. I mean, it's just, It's the old Zig Ziglar. If you help enough people get what they want, you're always going to have what you want. And I think if Zig were still here, he would say, you don't do it so you'll have what you want, but that's just the benefit of it. It just comes back to you, I believe. And so I love that, being a multiplier mindset versus being a diminisher. And maybe we all ought to check ourselves day by day and ask ourselves, who do we help win today? I think if we do that, that makes us a winner. If we don't, then I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I read that book a long time ago. Amazing book. If you haven't read it, for the listeners, read Multipliers. It's such a great book. But
Was it Liz Wiseman? Did I get that right? I'm not.
That's a good question. I need to go figure that out.
Yeah, we need to look that up. But Multipliers, yeah. It's a really good book. Whoever wrote it.
It really is. And to your point, for decades, this is just how it's like breathing for me, where I help anybody and everybody any way that I can, appropriately develop people, not looking for compensation the vast majority of the time. And people will ask me, like, why are you doing this? Nobody does that. I said, well, this makes me feel good. So selfishly, I want to feel good. So there you go. And to your point, Randy, it exposes me to so many more opportunities I can choose to play financially in if I want to. So, when you say when it comes back, well, it does big time, because when people know you're not operating from a win-lose perspective, it's all about win-win. Those types of folks want to hang out with you. They want to have you get involved with what they're doing. And I get opportunities every week because of this. And I wish I could do all of them. I just can't. But isn't it amazing?
For sure. And go back to what we were saying about the idea of the best leader you've ever known. I'm guessing nobody's thinking about a self-serving person. It's always that person who's thinking about others. We think it's one of the character traits or the heart habits of leaders that others want to follow, is they always think others first. They have that mindset that you're describing.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, do I think of others first by interacting the way I'm describing? I'm doing what's best for me. I mean, I think we all do what's in our own best self-interest, but thinking of others first is what's best for me. But I have to keep it in balance, because if we don't do it right, and you sort of alluded to that earlier, it can blow up. Like, we can give everything away and be stripped to the bone because we gave everything away and we didn't have it in balance. And I think it's important, at least financially, to cultivate that to where we're really growing it. The more resources we have, the bigger impact we can have in the world. So it kind of goes back to all in balance going through, right?
Yeah. Well, it's you used the word earlier, a win-win situation. And I think that's the way we think about it, because it's really hard. But I'll just say this. I want to make sure that I default to thinking about that other person first, because truthfully, Lee, I've loved me some me. I'm going to have no problem thinking about me. And so I've got to work hard to think, how can I add value to this other person? And if I can do that, all of a sudden it's Mark and I are having this discussion about this actually. And he's, one of the things he tries to do is he practices, how do I add value to the person in front of me? And I think it's a great practice for all of us. And I was talking to him about that, and he said, here's what I find when I'm thinking about this other person, I'm actually thinking about myself less, and not thinking less of ourselves. To your point, there's greatness in everybody who's listening here. You need to think highly of yourself and understand that. But I think we all would do better. The world would be better, I believe, if we all thought less about ourselves and more about the person, our neighbor, so to speak. And so, yeah, it's an interesting conversation, but I think we all could probably learn to do a little better there when it comes to thinking about the person in front of us.
Well, I think you're right. And I'm just an advocate for keeping it in balance, because helping others can sometimes help, and it can sometimes make it worse. And it's easy for, folks like us to be taken advantage of if we're not careful. But to your point, when I'm working with individuals, I want everybody to win. And that's all I'm thinking about, is like, what next steps do they need to take? What's going on so they can win? And And I don't know if you knew this, but Mark was actually a guest on my podcast, Show Your Value, which
Okay.
he was fantastic. I mean, imagine starting at Chick-fil-A with, I think it was 70 stores, and he stayed there through 19,000 stores or 27,000 stores, something crazy. It was 19
I mean,
billion sales.
44 years, I think he was there. And so, yeah, he's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I loved his book, Uncommon Greatness. Just a lot of good nuggets there. So kind of back
I
to,
will mention Mark and I have
Mhm.
a new book that we're doing that'll come out in, I think it's September the 2nd. We're doing a new book called Lead Every Day. Actually, it's a little sneak peek here. It's a leadership operating system to help people become a better leader, improve their team performance, and ultimately strengthen their organization. So that's yeah, we've got a fun project going right now together. So yeah, Mark Scold, he's amazing.
Yeah, I'll look for the book. I can't wait to see it. I love all of that stuff where leaders can be more intentional about being better leaders, creating more value. When I think about leadership, just generally speaking for me, and I'm sure I'll simplify it more, but it's creating value with and through others. And I specifically go to creating value, not adding value. Adding value isn't nearly as objective as creating value, and just it suggests measurement and all that. And then when I think about leadership within an organization, the definition that I like that seems to apply across the board is leaders get results and they foster an environment where every team member is intrinsically motivated and empowered to create more value over time. So that's how I generally think about it. And I think there could be individual
I love
leadership
that.
traits for every organization that are unique to that organization. I love alignment tools and getting it right. Not one size fits all, but really getting it right. But that's how I think about it, creating value with and through others. And then if you're a leader, you have to get results, but you need to do it with your team. And we know we've won when they're flying on their own. We're kind of like water skiing behind the team. We're not kicking them to get them out of bed in the morning. But yeah, how does that land on you? And how are you guys talking about that when somebody says, what does it mean to be a leader? How do you answer that?
Yeah, I love the idea of creating value. I think that's so powerful to frame it that way. And when we talk about leadership, as I said, we use this picture of leadership, and we talk about our definition really is not so much a definition; it is about what a leader does. And so we use from Uncommon Greatness, we use the serve model, we call it, and basically the five things that leaders do: they see the future, they cast vision, they make sure everybody knows what, where we're trying to take people. They engage and develop other people. It's not enough just to have a vision. You got to be able to take some people with you. And I always think, the goal. I hear leaders say all the time, "It's lonely at the top." It's only lonely at the top if you go to the top by yourself. The goal is to get to the top together, and so that engage and develop others. We talk about reinventing continuously. We're innovation and collaboration and understanding change. There's things we want different, uh, but when we think, or there's things, I'll say it this way: we want to be better. Better is always going to be different, and so we've got to be continually reinventing. We talk about valuing results and relationships. It's some of the stuff that you've alluded to there. We won't be in business if we don't have results, but if we forget that we're in the people business, we won't be in business either. And so it's the tension there between those. And then let's go back to my iceberg. It's about embodying a leader's heart, and there's some heart habits that we teach there. And so when we think about leadership, we could give you a definition, but I think it's much more about what leaders do, and we believe you practice your way to high performance. We say all the time, hope is not a strategy, and I think most people think I can just get a definition or put it on the break room wall and that'll be enough. We've got to behave our way to where we want to go, I believe. And so our definition would be much more behavioral when we think about it, and we use that serve model to help us stay rooted in the right things.
You said something there that I think is huge, and you just flew right by it. With practice your way to getting great results, something along those lines.
Yeah,
Talk about that a little bit more, because I'm a super fan of just live resistance, being on the front line, almost like sparring in martial arts.
yeah.
You can't just read about it, kick air and punt. You actually have to spar with live resistance. I think it's the same for business. So talk about that.
Yeah, we use the phrase "you practice your way to high performance," or you practice your way to results, however you want to frame that up. But I believe in practice so much. Again, hope is not a strategy, and I think there's so many people that think if we do this, maybe something will happen, rather than being strategic. They're just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that things will get better. I think there's so much power in practicing. Like, what are we really trying to do? Why does it matter? What do we need to do next? And I love that practice mindset. I'm an old athlete, and just going to practice every day, and an old coach too, going to practice every day and rolling out the ball. That's not enough. You've got to have a plan on how are we going to work on our fundamentals, how are we going to work on our team skills, all those kind of things. And I think when you have a plan, you actually can begin to see improvement pretty quickly. But if you're just winging it, it's, I had a CEO told me not long ago, I feel like sometimes our team is just playing whack-a-mole, and the old county fair game where you're hitting the one little varmint pops up and you hit it with a hammer. And then these are fake, by the way, if anybody's listening around the world, these are stuffed animals, but it's just like, we're just moving from one fire to the next and putting out fires. And I don't think that gets us to where we want to go. So I think practice is so important. Now, when I say practice, most people, they think, well, I'm practicing, but I would call it undistracted practice. It's so easy in our world I've just been reading again Cal Newport's book on deep work, and Cal's talking about being able to focus on what it is we're trying to do. And I think there's so much power in that. If we're not careful, we'll be trying to listen to something, or we're distracted with our email, or we've got another text that comes in, versus really practicing what it is we're trying to do strategically to move the ball toward our vision. And I think if we can get that right in a focused way, it's amazing what we can accomplish. But if we don't, if we stay distracted, it's almost impossible for us to reach our potential.
Yeah, two big things there. I'm getting listening to you. One is time management. If we're going to be distracted every 3 minutes, how could we ever do deep work? I've heard you talk about that. And then the other side is the framework for how we're choosing to create value. And I don't find that, gosh, not even 10% of leaders understand the business model for their business. So if you're going to practice, you're going to create value, you can do all kinds of stuff, and no wonder whack-a-mole is happening, because we're not making decisions aligned with a business model that we can all improve on, refine continually. What are you finding there? Because they're doing great things, they're just not connected to making the company more valuable.
Well, it's amazing how many leaders are busy. They are busy. They have full schedules and packed out lives, and that's for sure, no question. But I fear that most leaders, and I don't know if it's 90%, but maybe it's higher than 90%. Most of us, from time to time at least, confuse activity with accomplishment, and I think they're totally different. Being busy is not the goal. Being effective is the goal. And so I think we have to really check ourselves in the mirror and say, am I really about the things that I need to be about? Meaning, there are probably things on all of our schedules. I work on this all the time. What is the highest, best use of my time? And if I'm not careful, I'll just have a bunch of stuff that somebody else could be doing. And then I leave undone the things that only really I need to be doing, that I maybe even that I can do in our context. And so I just would encourage anybody listening to ask themselves that question. Are you spending most of your time on the highest, best use of your time? Or do you have just a bunch of stuff going on that maybe it's important even, but somebody else could do it? And by doing it myself, I am bottlenecking our business if I'm not careful. And I'm also robbing that next person. Let's say, Lee, you're on my team. I'm robbing you of the opportunity to grow into who you could become, because I've got my hands on everything. It's almost like, we would describe that as like a quarterback model of leadership. Think about a quarterback. The quarterback touches the ball pretty much on every play. And if I've got my hands in everything and I'm micromanaging and I'm copied on every email, I've not really built leaders. I've not developed leaders. Then I'm gonna struggle. And by the way, I'm gonna be really tired because it's exhausting when your capacity is squeezed to the limits. And I'm guessing there are a lot of people listening right now who they fall into that camp. And so I want to encourage them to make sure that you're evaluating how you're using your time and what you're doing to develop the people around you to help you go where you can. Your structure around you should enable what you're trying to do, not inhibit what you're trying to do. And I think so many times, again, I'm the bottleneck of what could happen. And so I gotta keep looking in the mirror there, trying to um, trying to make some change and some progress.
Yeah, I've always thought, at least for a very long time, the single biggest limiting factor in every organization is the leader at the top. They need to get out of the way, allow things to happen, and all of it. And I took over as CEO of a company called Dinner Table in May of last year. And we're all about building communities of families, raising kids to create value in the world, and a place to go for practical family wisdom. So we have, as of yesterday, I looked, we had over 32,000 parents in less than 9 months in our Dinner Table family community, 67 countries. So here's why I bring it up. I'm watching parents take all the struggle away from their kids. So they're not developing to be an adult. Like they're just not getting them ready. And then the partners that are coming in. So we have schools that are making this program available for the parents. So the parents show up. Now we got the parent component, and a lot of them are bringing their kids. And I got to watch. So you've got helicopter parenting. I got to watch helicopter teaching. The poor kids are sitting there, and the teachers are flipping the page and do this and answering questions for them. It's like, oh my gosh, we're not letting them struggle. So when it comes to let's go into the professional side. If you're a manager and you're developing your team members, what's the like? How do you find the appropriate level of struggle? Not too much, so they blow up, but the appropriate level of struggle so they really develop and not. Obviously, you can't do everything for them, or they won't develop. But how do you address that? That's a giant challenge in my view.
Yeah, well, I'll say two things here. One, I think about my own life as a grandfather now. We've got 8 little grandkids, which is wild. But one of the phrases I've been using, my wife been using this as well, is when we get with them and if you're 2 and you can't do something, or even if you're 9 months old or a year old and you're trying to learn to walk, I mean, think about it. You can't so many people in organizations right now are still crawling because and we've got one little grandson right now. He's really fast at crawling, and he's gotten so fast at crawling. He actually, I think it's slowing him down on his walking. I mean, it's like I can walk, but if I try that, I'm going to fall down. If I crawl, I can just get where I'm going real fast. And I think that's the picture I would leave anybody in an organization right now. There are people that they're really fast at crawling, whatever it is you've got them doing, but they'll never run if you don't make them walk. And so the phrase we use with these little grandkids all the time is, you can do hard things. Now, I know you're not going to probably say to your employees, you can do hard things. I mean, maybe you need to, but you're not going to talk to them like you would a grandkid. But I love the mindset of, we're going to create an environment where people can feel like they can try something and fail. And it's amazing what happens when we fail. And John Maxwell always talked about failing forward. It's failure is a really good thing. It actually increases our capacity to grow and get better if we get back up. And I read something, Lee, a while back that said, if you're not failing about 20% of the time, and I don't know how they quantify that. I mean, we probably could quantify it, but they said if you don't fail 20% of the time, you're probably not growing to your potential. I love that mindset. That is we're going to create an environment where failure is embraced. We're going to get better every day. And I just think there's so many people that are still struggling to walk because we just allowed them to crawl in their job, and we've not called out the best in them. And now I'm over here busy again. This may be because I'm bottlenecking things. I've not asked somebody else for help. I've not challenged them. I've not taught them. And then I get real busy. And let's say, again, you're on my team and I'm going to promote you, and I've got so much going on, I don't even have time. And a lot of times I see this happen in organizations all the time. I'll say, Lee, here's your orientation. If you need anything, let me know. And then I just hand it to you and I walk away. And then 6 weeks later, you haven't said anything to me, but I'm really frustrated because you're not doing it the way I was doing it. And it's really on me. I never taught you. I didn't train you. I didn't equip you. You weren't developed. I just delegated it, hoping again there's our hope word. And I'm a big believer in hope, but it is not a strategy for high performance. It is important for us to teach people along the way, and then we can hand things off. And here's what I found. It's amazing that the people around me are so much more capable than me of doing what it is that I'm trying to do. I mean, they're gifted, they're passionate so many times about it, and then it frees me up to lead. And so, if anybody's listening who's struggling to balance this, the answer could be in that structure around you. I heard a leader say one time, again, your structure could be the inhibitor of your performance. And I don't think we think about that very often. It's like, do we really have the structure around us built? We think about it on bridges and homes and buildings, but in our leadership, so many times where things are not standing as tall as they could because we don't really have a foundational structure built of the people and systems, maybe even sometimes, that we need to ensure and make excellence repeatable.
Yeah, there's so much there. We could talk another hour about that. For me, a big takeaway from that part of the discussion is how can our listeners that are leaders be a lot more intentional about developing their team? And,
Yeah.
it's one thing to develop non-supervisory folks, but it's a whole other thing to develop leaders that are developing other leaders, developing non-supervisory folks and going through all of that. I wonder what percentage are super intentional about how they do it. My experience is not super intentional.
I would say it's very low, and I would also say that's one of the reasons we wrote the operating system. We've created this operating system for us is because most of the people listening here, nobody ever taught us. No, we didn't. We probably got put into leadership because we were pretty good at our job. We got another opportunity. Our boss was busy, and he or she said, if you need anything, let me know. And somehow we just survived. And I don't think that's the strategy that we want in our organizations. We've got to have a process. And I'll go back to my old school teaching days. I wasn't qualified to be a teacher. I got hired. It was a long story. I won't bore your audience with it, but I had a principal who was desperate to find a teacher. She had a teacher quit that morning. It was the middle of the year, Christmas break time of year. And I happened to call that afternoon. And so anyway, I got put into this job and I was teaching ninth grade biology, which makes no sense in any universe, but I survived the spring. And then I got back to the next fall, and the principal and the lead teachers there explained to me, we're going to have some lesson plans. There's a scope and sequence here. We're not going to be able to just stay a day ahead of the ninth graders. You got, again, I wasn't trained as a teacher, so I'm learning all this and that made sense to me. And so fast forward 25 years when we started creating our content, I think so many times leaders are just, we read the latest, greatest stuff. You probably do. I read all that stuff. It's great. But if we don't have a process of how to develop leaders, and I think we're just it's just random acts of training at that point. And so let's make sure that we have a way to think holistically about how do we develop leaders. And so we created that operating system to help us do that and help these companies that we work with. And to me, if we can put people in a process, it's still organic. I mean, it's more like a greenhouse than I always say. It's not like you're baking slice and bake cookies here. Every leader's different, and every person, we're not cutting cookies, but I think there are things we can put in place to ensure that a leader at our organization looks like a leader at our organization is supposed to look. But if we've not defined that, and we've not trained it, and we've not coached it, it's random at best.
Yeah, 100%. And I would think foundationally for all of that, as a leader, do you believe your people can be developed? And the reason I'm saying that, I think that is, they'll say yes, but I think their actions say it's actually pretty low. And I'll talk to leaders that say, well, I explained this to the team. They didn't get it. They just don't get it. And then I always ask the question, well, how long did it take you to get it? And it's usually, a few years or longer. Well, can we give them 10
still don't
minutes?
Get it.
It's like, or I still don't get it right. But it's your job to develop them. And I think a lot of leaders, do they really believe everybody can be developed? Like, I believe everybody on the planet can do what what I did and even better. Some are on track to do it in half the time, some on track to do it in 300 years, but they can all move in that direction. So talk about that a little bit. I mean, what
Yeah,
percentage
well,
of leaders do?
part of it is selection. Why would I ever hire somebody that I didn't think could be developed? And now if I'm let's say I'm the owner and I'm handling sales and marketing and product, and I mean I've got you. I mean, at some point you have all the plates you're trying to spin. If you're going to find somebody to help with marketing, it's going to be better than you. Then find somebody who's good at marketing. You're going to, you wouldn't want to, we always say you wouldn't want a baseball team with 9 second basemen. You're going to specialize in places, but there are values and things that you want to make sure that everybody has, but you want the skill part to be job specific. And so I love the idea of aligning people to their strengths before I assign them to a role. So I'm with you on that. I think it's a huge opportunity for us to multiply ourselves when we find people that are better at parts of our job than we, or maybe can give even more focus to it. Maybe you're really great at your job. I mean, you've been doing it. You got there first. You know all the answers to the test. That's great. But that doesn't mean you're the most effective at doing that. It's if you're doing 4 things, let's just use that as we got a pie here. We cut it into fourths. If you're spending a fourth of your time marketing and you're trying to run a company, that becomes very hard. And so you got to make sure that you get somebody who can focus on that marketing or sales or whatever it is. People have to connect their own dots here, but I think no question people are able to give more passion and focus to certain areas than I am. And so when I can hand that off, and even if we could use a silly math equation, I'm not sure this is right, but if somebody can do the work 50% of my work or 75% even, and you get 4 or 5 people around you that are doing 80% of your, at the level that they may not be as great as you. That's okay. So you're really great. But if you just start putting 4 people on it that are 80% as good as you, all of a sudden now it blows away what I can do. And so I like that mindset. I like to think that way as a leader. If I'm not careful, again, I can default to being the bottleneck, and then we never reach our potential because of me, not because of the people around me.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm the same. I want to hire super capable people and fully expect, as part of being on board, you're going to develop and create more and more and more value every single day. So I'd like to, Randy, now get into the book. So Winning Begins at Home. It's an amazing parable. I did it in one listening. I listened to the audiobook. And I think a really great message. But I talked to a lot of leaders, just like it sounds like your experience with. They're knocking it out of the park at work, but they're failing at home, and they're not thinking about. So, why did you write this book? What kind of led up to it, and what are some of the main lessons that you're communicating in it?
Yeah, so this will feel like a pretty hard pivot from this conversation we've had so far, and I think that's appropriate, because what happened was we're helping all these leaders in these organizations. We're teaching culture and we're teaching leadership and engagement and execution, all this stuff, which is so fun. We love seeing them, grow their companies and their performance go up and revenue and profit and all. That's all great, and yet I had CEO after CEO, owner after owner who kept saying, we're doing all this stuff. Things are great. And there's this angst in their life that things at home are not really like they should be. And so the definition I gave to it, or the way I talk about it, is, and through all these conversations, I kept discovering if you win at work and you lose at home, I think you still lose. I don't think the goal is to build a great company and blow up your family, or even think about beyond family, your health and your fitness and the way you handle your money and anything basically that happens outside the 9 to 5, all that 5 to 9 stuff. We that's the part of our lives that we value so much, and yet we struggle there oftentimes the most. And nobody was really talking about it. And so I thought, when we create all this content for leaders, I want to create something to help us have this conversation outside of work. And it's been so great to see the impact it's had on on leaders and organizations to really think if we don't focus on winning at home, it's probably not going to happen. And so, yeah, we created the book. One of the things that I love about the book, I love the parable. I'm a storyteller, so I love the parable aspect of it, and I think anybody that reads it will you can testify. They'll connect with different characters in different ways. But the part that I think is so powerful is this won't surprise based on the conversation we had so far. But I'm a practitioner, and so the back half, 70 pages of the book, not quite half, but 70 pages of it is basically a blueprint on how to build the family that you want. And so anybody that's listening that's struggling, like how do I do that? I mean, I think again that's a lot of our challenges. Nobody ever told us how to build a home life, and what do I do? And most people want to get it right, but they don't know how. And so, I mean, the danger is we just default back to work, because I can go to work and I'm going to get promoted because I do what I'm supposed to, and I've got expectations. My boss is telling me, or I've got a P&L if I'm the owner, and I can measure all that. Sometimes I don't even know how to measure it at home. And so that's where it came from. I mean, that's where it started. We were trying to help leaders know, hey, there's another side of your life, and we want to help you win there as well. I said earlier, I want everybody to be well led. I dream of everybody getting to grow up in a great family, and I know that's not going to happen. I mean, I know not everybody. There are a lot of hard situations. Any of us that are in a family, we all know family can be really hard. And yet I think there's some things we can do to put us on a track where that can be the most life-giving part of our lives. And so that was my heart behind it.
Yeah, amazing. One big word that kept jumping out at me as I was listening to it was awareness. And so you have one spouse that's building a business, one home, raising the family and doing all that, just not appreciating what the other side is doing or taking for granted in some way. Like the example of, hey, I'm going to come home and give my wife a couple hours off to go do something. And how come she didn't appreciate it when she's been doing this every single day, like all this time? And so just awareness, like even having the conversation about what's important and how we create value as a family. Maybe
Yeah.
talk about that a bit. I think that's a giant challenge. They just don't get why the other side isn't getting them.
Yeah. Well, I think communication is the oxygen of any relationship. It's the oxygen of your organization at work. By the way, this stuff applies at work as well, but it's the oxygen of your relationship. And I learned this years ago. My family, we were actually traveling in China, and we had an opportunity to go into the Jade Dragon Snow Mountain, I think is the name of it. It's the base of the Himalayas, and it's at about 15,000 feet, 15,000 feet. We got up to, that sounds like we did some climbing. We actually didn't. We stayed in a town at about 8,000 to acclimate for a day or two. And then we got on a chairlift at about 10,000 and go a couple of miles up a mountain. And we end up at this overlook, and it was pretty amazing place. We didn't earn it by climbing up there, but here's what happened. At the bottom, Lee, they had canisters of oxygen for sale. They were optional. And I'm thinking, do we need these oxygen? We're pretty fit. I think we'll be okay. We're not going to do anything, exert ourselves. And about half the people were getting oxygen, half weren't, and it's like a little tourist trap to me. And so anyway, we get on this chairlift, we go a couple miles up this mountain, and they let us out, and there's literally no air. I mean, you get off, and which, if you've not been at altitude, I'd never had it, not like this kind of altitude. It's just like you can't breathe. I mean, and there was literally, when we got off the chairlift, there were people that are over, off the rail. They're throwing up. I mean, it was just like altitude sickness had already set in. And I'm thinking, my wife is looking at me like, why do we not have those, people breathing oxygen? They look like they're fine. The other people are struggling. So they only let us stay up there for about 30 minutes. But as I think back on that, it just was a reminder that you cannot live without oxygen. You can't. Anybody listening, just hold your breath for a minute. You might can do it for a minute. At some point in 3 or 4 minutes, you're going to be dying to breathe. And yet, how many of our marriages are suffocating because we don't talk to each other? We don't communicate. There is not an awareness like you're talking about, because we've not taken the time And communication is actually free. It doesn't cost you anything to talk to each other. It only costs you if you don't. And I think we end up just going through the motions day after day. So many of our relationships outside of work, even at work, but outside of work, we think that proximity is the same thing as intimacy, and I think they're two different things. I can live. Laura and I've been married 37 years. We can be in the same house. We can sleep in the same bed, and there not be connection. It's I know so many couples, they just go through the motions and think because they have the same mailbox that makes them connected. And I think communication is so important. And again, same thing at work. If we don't talk to each other, there's not going to be alignment. But if we do talk to each other and we do prioritize those times that we communicate and know what the other person is thinking and work to be empathetic and helpful. I mean, there's nothing more life-giving than when a relationship works the way it's supposed to. And honestly, nothing harder than one that doesn't work the way it's supposed to. So I think we all get that, but unfortunately, we don't act on it like we should most of the time.
Yeah. So, some of my friends over the years have been incredibly lonely while being in a relationship. So there's no intimacy, to your point. And you touch on that in the book on, the difference between, just sort of existing and going through the motions versus building, deeper intimacy. What are a couple of pointers there? Again, I recommend everybody reads the book, Winning Begins at Home, but what are a couple of points there to start those conversations and keep them going?
Well, I think talking to each other is important. I'll say one thing there, and then I want to take a little bit of a side road here. So I mentioned the word empathy, and I hear people talk about empathy all the time, and so just bear with me here for a second. So I looked it up in the dictionary. I'm like, I want to make sure I understand what empathy means, and it meant what I thought it did, but I want to make sure it means to understand and share in the feelings of another person. Which means, Lee, if you're going through something really good and you and I are connected and we're on a team together, or let's say we're in a family together, if something good is happening for you, I understand that. And I'm like, that's great, Lee, but I'm over here secretly thinking, man, I wish something good would happen for me. Why does everything good always happen for Lee? That's not empathy. That's jealousy. If something bad happens to you and I understand it and I say I'm sorry, but I'm over here secretly thinking, man, I'm glad that's Lee and not me. Well, that's pity. That's not empathy either. And so I think again, let's go back even to the servant leader mindset. It's that I can understand if you're going through it and it's hard, then it's hard for me. And I can't exactly understand what you're going through, but I can lend my strength to you, and I can help you, and I can encourage you, and I can be there for you. And I don't even have to say anything. Let's go back to a marriage in that relationship. Do I even understand what my spouse is going through? And so that to me is where it starts. But I said I want to take a little side road. I think if I was going to practice this, I would say, how do I focus on being there when I'm there? And what I mean by that is I think in today's world, technology is such a trap and is such a distraction. It's so hard in our relationships if we're with somebody and we're not really there. Let's say I'm reading bedtime stories to my kids, my grandkids now, and I'm actually thinking about tomorrow's meeting, or I'm just not there with them. I'm there, but I'm not there. I got to send one more text, or I need to check my email again after this is over, or what's the, what are we going to do at our quarterly retreat? I mean, my mind can be everywhere, and I think it's really hard to be present. And so that's where I think it starts, practicing just being present with someone. And I shared with a group a while back, a guy was asking me, like, how do you do that? You get to decide, but can you choose if you work at an office, can you choose an intersection on the way home, and you can just literally in your mind, when you go through that intersection, I'm going to leave work at work, and now I'm moving toward home. Or when I leave my neighborhood and I'm going to work, let's leave home at home. I want to I want to make sure that I go do great work too. I'm not arguing for just having a great family and not having a great career. But I think so many of us are just, especially now with technology the way it is, it becomes so hard to stay present, planted where your feet, be where your feet are planted versus I'm always on and always accessible and always available and then never really connected to anything or anyone. And I think that's part of the danger of the culture we live in these days. But I think an awareness of that, a starting place, can I choose that intersection? Or if, the person who's sitting there going, well, I work in my basement. Okay. Is there a door jam that when you walk through that, you're going to go be where you're going to be? Because I'll close this answer with this thought, Lee. Has there ever been a day when you've finished work, the schedule at work, let's say 5 o'clock, you're done, and you go home and you think, it's actually, I can leave at 4:30 because there's nothing left to do. That's just never happened for me. I've never gone home at the end of a day and thought there's no more work ever to be done. So I pretty much have just finished my career. That's not the way. There's always more work to be done. And yet I think what's going to happen is we're going to get down the road, and we get older. I mean, you and I are older, and you look back, you don't regret missed emails and missed appointments and those things. And I don't want anybody missing emails and missing appointments. I'm not arguing for that, but you start missing ballet recitals and you start missing, conversations with your 13-year-old that you blink, and you and I both know that goes by pretty fast. And that's the stuff when I look back, I'm going, I wish I had some of that back.
Yeah, 100% love all of that. Well, I would say one of my most powerful life hacks for me is to be present and super curious, and be that way during the day, during the evening, with all waking hours. And it makes such a difference. And if I'm worried about something going on at work when I'm with the family, is worrying about it going to make it better? No. Is it going to hurt the relationship with the family? Is the opportunity to strengthen it? Yes. So yeah, I think being as present as you can be and hyper curious with what's going on. And yeah, I've heard you talk about this in other podcasts, this concept of work-life balance. And I remember when that term came out, I see it as one giant blended life, and priorities for our time are going to move around in all areas of our life. And I think if we're present and curious when we're with those different aspects or areas of our life, relationships, et cetera, they all understand, and it still strengthens across the board. Thoughts?
I totally agree. I think, and you've probably heard me say, I think work-life balance is a myth. I mean, let's just take out the 7-8 hours you sleep every day and you got all your other time. You're going to spend way more time at work than you do at home. I think the key is to be there when you're there, like we're talking about. And so it's there's tension there and balance. I had a friend tell me years ago, balance is learning to live in the center of the tension. There's going to be tension and it's okay. But balance, it's not a the old teeter-totter or seesaw. We're trying to get the equal weight on both sides. And if I can go to work for 8 hours a day and be at home for 8 hours a day, it's all going to be perfect. It's not the way it works. It's can I be curious when I'm there? I hear people say all the time, I have a hard time connecting with my teenager. So okay, so what? Do I just give up? I think we have a hard time connecting to our teenager because we're not curious about what they're interested in. We're not talking to them about the things that they are interested in talking about. And when we don't, we actually forfeit that connection. I think most kids are willing to connect. It's just, are we willing to talk about the things that they want to talk about, or do we need to talk about adult things when they're 12? They're not really interested in what I'm struggling with when I'm 50 or whatever. So I just think a lot of times we use those as excuses. And I think the next generation actually gets a bad rap because but truthfully, as it's almost like it is at work, it's a leadership issue. It's not a kid issue or an employee issue at work. In home, I need to make sure I'm doing my part to be the leader if I'm a mom or dad.
Yeah, 100%. I wish we had time to get into the 10 additional topics we haven't had a chance to get into that I wrote down here for this conversation. Was there one or two big takeaways from this conversation for you?
Well, I love obviously talking leadership. I would say, all the work stuff that we talked about. To me, it comes back to being intentional to to grow myself as a leader and make sure that I'm doing everything I can to develop the people around me to help us do what it is we're trying to do. And it should be a we deal. It really should be if we're going to make the most impact. And I think you said earlier, it's there's a lot of joy in that. It's life-giving when we do something great together. It's a lot of fun to be able to look back and go, man, look what we did. And I think that's awesome. And so I would just say be intentional there and practice. I mean, again, I think you practice your way to high performance. But I would say at the end here, let's don't just win at work. Let's make sure that we understand that if we do win at work and lose at home, I do think we lose. And so I think if I could leave people with a picture, it would be go to your 80th birthday party. Stephen Covey years ago talked about, writing your eulogy. I don't really want to think about my eulogy right now, but let's say you can go to your 80th birthday party and you've got all your friends and family around and your kids and grandkids and spouse and whatever you got going on, probably some coworkers, people you've worked with through your career. What would you want those people to say? And I would guess that most of our regret will come on those days because we didn't focus enough on those relationships outside of work. And I'll just leave people with a question here that I ask myself often. How would I live my life in such a way that the people who know me the best actually would love me the most? And I know so many people, the people that know them the best actually, and they probably respect them the least. It's like they're one way at work and they come home and they're not that way, or they're not present, they're not connected, they're not curious, to use your word. How amazing would it be if the people that know you the best, not just love you the most, but they actually like you. They like being in your family. And I think that's possible if we will focus on some of the things that we talked about in Winning Begins at Home. So yeah, to me, I would encourage people to get a copy of the book, work through the blueprint. I think you can have an incredible life outside of work. And I think it starts with making a decision to go after that. So that would be my final word of encouragement.
All right. Thank you. 100% agree. If our listeners want to connect with you or learn more about the work you're doing, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, they can find me at leadeveryday.com. Reach out, info@leadeveryday.com. The book is available, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's available actually at Lead Every Day as well. We have a course that I've done around it. So if you want some coaching through that, you can get the book, and the course is available. But yeah, if we can help leaders out there, help your organizations, we love all that stuff. It's so much fun to try to create value. I think that's the way I'll start saying it. I love that.
Okay. And they can connect with you on LinkedIn as well. Is that okay?
Yeah, we're LinkedIn, Instagram, all over the place. Just Randy Gravitt, you'll find me.
All right. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you for the work that you do. It's so needed in the world, Randy. Thanks for being my guest today.
Hey, thanks for all you do with Show Your Value. It's awesome, Lee, that you're out serving leaders as well, and appreciate all the work you're doing. I know you're creating lots of value as well.
All right. Thank you. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you got some value out of today's episode, please like and subscribe. And until next time, show your value to the world.